You are listening to From Sobriety to Recovery with Jesse Mogul. Let's get to the show. Welcome back to From Sobriety to Recovery. I am your host, Jesse Mogul. I am in addiction recovery, and I have just finished up my cultural diversity class for my master's degree in psychology to become a clinical mental health counselor, which is a really fancy term for a licensed professional counselor, which is also a fancy term for therapist. And one of the really awesome aspects of taking a cultural diversity class online is that so much of what the work that we put in is based off of answering discussion questions in these essays that we then post into a public forum for all of us to read and comment on, and there's participation points. So they really do drive home the active pursuit of other people's perspectives. And there was a lot of varying perspectives in the class, from black and white to Hispanic to European. There was a lot of varying degrees of people bringing in their own perspectives on their lives, straight and gay. So much was happening inside of our conversations that it really was fun to learn how other people have experienced their lives here in the United States through the perspective of somebody who may be a first or second generation citizen. There was multiple Native Americans in the course as well. So it was very cool to be able to take on some of these other perspectives about some of the mental health challenges that they've overcome, ones that they're still going through, and being able to bring all of this into what will amount to this episode. When we seek to challenge the perceptions that we can be bringing into our sobriety and recovery, there's obviously going to be the perceptions we have on the world, ones that we've cultivated through our own experiences, whether it's how to make friends, whether it's how to love, whether it's communication, how to save money, what a good job is versus a bad job. All these things are going to be based off of the experiences that we've had mostly through our own eyes. When I say mostly through our own eyes, it's because we are not, let's say, immune to the way that other people's perspectives on the world around us and them, we're not immune to their perspectives dripping its way into our own cognitive perception of reality. Let's say it that way. And when this first starts to happen, it's at a young age, when we're 0 to 7, and we're really great observers as children, but we're not necessarily great at making meanings and understanding context and perspective. So we might see the parents arguing and think that that's a natural way to behave, or it might make us uncomfortable, so we think that that's an unnatural way to behave. When we don't really understand the context of why the argument's happening, we just know that people who normally aren't yelling are now yelling. And then we create an entire meaning out of that because we aren't possessing of the skills to articulate what it is that we're experiencing in the moment of our parents yelling back and forth. So we create a meaning out of it. We interpret it however we interpret it, and then it goes into the catalog of the unconscious mind. And the more often we see the yelling or the not yelling, the smiling or the crying, those all begin to make meanings, and it becomes part of our perceptions of reality. Perhaps it's how we perceive a relationship should go. So maybe you're one of those people who yells very loudly and wants to scream and throw things, but then 20 minutes later wants to be all cuddly and cute, because that could be perhaps what you saw as a child. Or maybe you saw only the yelling, and now you want to be able to bring in some of the cuddling and the makeup afterwards. So you may have seen that somewhere else, potentially movies, television shows, other people and adults in your life. Randomly at a park one day, you could have seen something that really meant something to you, and now it's part of your internal dialogue and messaging system coming from the unconscious mind. The layers of this are infinite. There's really no stopping the depth at which we start to create our reality. And one of the ways that we're obviously going to be creating our reality is by what culture we decide we are a part of. And so as I'm going through this cultural diversity class, I realize that within our culture, a lot of labels are created for how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive others. When I say that I'm a tall, straight, white American male, that's going to create visual image of something in your head. Maybe it's me because you've seen the cover of my podcast art and you know what I look like, but it could also be another male in your life of prominence, or a random person you saw on TV, or a random person you saw in the grocery store. It could be a myriad of different people, but still, when I start to throw out labels like tall, straight, white, American, and male, there are perceptions of what I might believe, what I might think, what I might hold dear and true as my values, my morals, my ethics. All of these things are going to come into play, not necessarily because you know a tremendous amount about me, other than obviously almost 300 episodes of a podcast, but you're only going to know what I've shared. You don't necessarily know all the intricacies of my personality and the nuances of my day-to-day life, but you've created a visual image of me based off of what I've talked about, and perhaps any interactions you've had with me. If you're a client, or you're in the tribe, or you've sent me an email, there's lots of different ways that you will perceive me. Very few of them, if any, do I really have control over, because I can attempt to show you a very positive side of me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything I've said you've agreed with. Doesn't mean that anytime you've contacted me that I've been quick with my responses, or I've been as attentive as you would have preferred. And you're going to create all these varying layers of perception about me based off of a lot of different inputs, of which, again, other than just me being me and hopefully saying some pretty cool stuff, I don't have any control over how you interpret it. And that's how our culture, obviously, whether we realize it or not, begins affecting us at a young age. What labels might you be utilizing in order to explain yourself, right? If I say that I'm tall, you might say that you're short or medium height. If I say straight, you might say that you're bisexual or transgender or gay or lesbian, or any of the pluses and other letters that are now coming out and becoming utilized more often to help other people identify with the society and with themselves what sexual orientation they want to belong to. Whenever I say that I'm white, maybe you think you're black, or you're brown, or you're Asian, or you're a Native American, right? And some people would just use colors across the board when describing those. So you've got the black and the brown and the white and the yellow and the red. Some of those can come off as a little bit stereotypical and racist-y because of the way that they were used back in the day. I mean, there was a football team in Washington, D.C. called the Redskins for years, and they changed their name because Redskins became inappropriate, and people started feeling that it was a bigoted way of describing a Native American. But we'll still hold on to the black and the white and the brown to certain degrees. But even then, we want to start throwing labels like European American or African American or Mexican American or Ecuadorian American. So now we're starting to come up with even more labels. We got tall, straight, white, American. You could be British. You could be from Serbia. You could be from Australia, South Africa, Ecuador. I keep going back to Ecuador because I recently watched a show about Ecuador and what they're doing with their economy. So I might use Ecuador a lot right now. You could be Antarctican, Ian. I don't know if anybody's ever been born in Antarctica, and that's a continent, not necessarily a country, but still, maybe if you were randomly born in Antarctica and you listen to this show, thanks for joining in. You're probably the only person who could call themselves an Antarctician. But, right, we have over 100, I think it's 70, 80, 90 countries on this planet, and they're ebbing and flowing as civil wars and different reasons. So now all of a sudden there's another cultural label that could potentially dictate how you identify with yourself. And then I call myself male. Other people call themselves female. There's also a lot of binary and other terms that are now being utilized within society. And whether you agree with any of this or not, just bypass any kind of emotional surge you might have over some of these labels. And let's just step back and look at it from a bit of a rational, clinical perspective. That these are really just labels that we place upon ourselves that only really identify a very small part of our personality, a small part of who we are. It's the external way other people might want to consolidate who Jesse Mogul is in order to hopefully figure something out about me so that their brain doesn't have to work too hard. The brain loves to delete, distort, and generalize. We've covered this before. I'm going to be bringing those back as their own episode when I launch this as a YouTube show. Here in the next handful of episodes, I'm going to be bringing back like 20 or 30 of my favorite topics and redoing them through my own current present based perspective rather than some of these that haven't been touched upon since episode 11. Random episode. I have no idea what episode 11 was about, but maybe episode 11 is one of those that I will end up doing again, but for the video side of it. And of course, if you haven't been paying attention linearly, if you have not been paying attention linearly, you might think that I just said I'm going to be taking this off of podcast format and moving the whole thing to YouTube. I am not. I'm just going to be shooting them simultaneously so that anybody who wants to watch me over YouTube can see me, presumably as I just walk on my treadmill with a fan swirling above my head, so it looks like I've got like a halo that's turning rapidly, and then I'll just be shooting this as I stare out my window looking at the camera. Not really going to put a whole lot of effort into making sure that the background is super sweet, as much as I'm just going to make sure that the video and the audio are awesome. And for those of you who've ever wanted to see my face as I shoot this episode, congratulations, I will now make that a reality for you. So we're going to be bringing back a lot of our old material because this is going to be the first time that I've done it on YouTube, and I want to make sure that the episodes have impact and value for anyone who happens to find me new, who wants to be able to immediately learn cool things about their sobriety and recovery that they can then go put into an action step that day for themselves. And so as I think about all these different ways, where was I going with that? I was talking about all these different labels: delete, distort, generalize. So the deletion is this is what we do when we start labeling people as tall, straight, white, American, and male. It's just an opportunity for us to delete out a significant portion of who that person actually is in front of us in favor of stereotypes and very easily created boxes that we can just put somebody in. And where I'm going with all of this is that as you are a child, you start to do this. You're deleting certain aspects of somebody in favor of noticing that they're black or they're white or they're male or they're female, they're tall, they're short. You're noticing all of these things. And when you begin to formulate how you're going to behave, when you get into that modeling behavior, which you're definitely doing when things are being implanted and imprinted upon you up to about 7 years old, but then really strong modeling behaviors start up right around 7. And that's whenever the things that you have been taking out in through all of your observations become the ways that you start to act. And that's when parents will find out that they've been showing their kids some not so good habits whenever they all of a sudden have to start disciplining them for ways that they're behaving that they see in themselves. They're like, wait, where did kid learn that? Oh, I say that a lot. That's where they learned that. So when we ask ourselves, how is our culture creating this perception of ourselves? How are these external factors dictating what we think we're able to achieve, who we can become, the amount of money we can make, how prone to addiction that we might be? It's really important to understand that these cultural perceptions, and again, they're shaped by our race and our gender and our sexuality and the color of our skin and the religion that we abide by. All of these are taken into account, and you can't forget about media and anything that's on a television, a movie, anything that can be found on a smartphone. And then, of course, there's the personal experiences. All of these begin to impact our behavior. They begin to impact our self-view. And you can, look at, like, I call myself American. Well, if somebody called themselves English or Irish or Scottish, drinking on the island of the United Kingdom is very prevalent. And there's a lot of generational trauma that comes with being Irish and Scottish because of the way that they were perpetrated upon by the English hundreds upon hundreds of years ago. So you're born into the Irish or Scottish community, and you might be more prone to heavy abusive drinking, not necessarily abusive like you're punching people, but abusive to yourself, and that you overdrink and you put yourself into a state of flux more often than you prefer. And that can come from your culture that says, oh, well, this is how we handle our emotions. This is how we communicate with things. We go to the pub, we overdrink, we yell and scream, we go and mess up the city a little bit, or we just go and shove our faces with kebab, and then we go home, we wake up hungover, and we go to, everybody's working for the weekend kind of mentality. These are how cultural perceptions begin to influence us at a young age, so that when we become older, now all of a sudden we're stuck with all of these cultural perceptions dictating who we think we can become, what addictions we might be prone to, what vices are more favorable within our family, within our neighborhood, within our culture than others. I would imagine when opiates are so readily available in Southeast Asia that it might be more common for people to get themselves addicted to opiates there, and probably more amenable to society that they would be addicted to opiates versus the United Kingdom, where drinking is way more prevalent, and perhaps an opioid addiction is even more frowned upon and stigmatized than it needs to be, simply because it's just another version of a vice, but it's not the preferred vice, which is the drinking. So when we want to begin to think about the way that the psychology of our minds perceives our cultural perceptions and how it begins to influence us, we want to begin to ask ourselves some reflective questions so that we can identify the harmful perceptions that might be negatively impacting our ability to recover. Because there's going to be so many different layers in our recovery process that if we aren't peeling back certain ones, we might be prone to a lapse or relapse simply because cultural norms within however you identify could dictate that, well, you don't really need to quit drinking, you just need to cut back. You don't need to stop doing this, you just need to pause it for a little bit. And that kind of mentality could seep its way in through conversations with our friends and our families and other people within our environment, and it could negatively impact our goal of long-term sobriety and recovery. So reflection questions like, what beliefs do I hold about my worth? What beliefs do I hold about my culture? How do I view my health and capabilities through the cultural perspective I was raised in? What societal standards am I trying to meet? What cultural standards am I trying to meet? What cultural standards am I not meeting? Who decided upon these cultural standards? When you start asking yourself these reflection questions, and I'm going to have an episode soon on radical inventories, and this has been brought up by multiple members of the tribe or clients, or recently I was giving a presentation at a addiction recovery center, and they were talking about, was it like a radical moral inventory? Well, what about a radical value inventory? What about a radical cultural inventory? What about a radical addiction inventory? What all could these look like if we actually sat down and started writing out some of the things that might just be spiraling in our head over and over and over again, that because they come in and out so fast, we never have a chance to really dissect them and investigate why they are affecting us. I consider myself a Southern person because I was born in Oklahoma and raised mostly in Florida, but I was also raised in Indiana, which gives me a strong Midwestern vibe. And I was also very much exposed to the Californian West Coast vibe whenever I lived out there during my 30s. So there's a lot of different cultures that come into play just based off of your environment. So if you're a Southern person, how might you perceive yourself through the lens of addiction based off of how the Southern culture perceives addiction? Right? They're also pretty heavily drinking. That whole hunting, fishing, and loving every day, as long as we got a beer in our hand kind of mentality, could lend itself to you saying, well, I don't want to stop drinking altogether because how am I going to fit in with all of my friends? Because what they love to do is, get out of work and all weekend long smoke some dope and drink some beers. Why can't I just do that? So you want to ask yourself these self-reflective questions. How do you view your Southern culture, your Midwestern culture, your Northeastern culture? How do you view those cultures and how they impact your health, your capabilities, your skills, your self-worth? You really can just take any sentence. How do I view my blank? My Southern culture, Northern culture, my male identity, my female identity, my white color, my black color, my brown color, and how do I view my blank and how that affects my blank? Health, capabilities, skills, finances, standard of living, standard of habits. Any of these can create an entire sentence that allows you to start taking an inventory of what it is that you perceive internally that is affecting the way you behave externally. Because when you start to do this in a way that really brings home some key discoveries about yourself, you can begin to locate common themes. And these common themes are going to be perceptions around addiction, perceptions around recovery, perceptions about being a male or a female or straight or gay or lesbian or poor or rich or driving a fancy car. Any of these things can begin to play into how you perceive yourself. And our perception of ourselves is so integral to our sobriety and recovery because it's where we begin to make our identity statements. And again, I've covered this ad nauseum on this show, that anytime you start saying, I am blank, you are making an identity level statement. I am Southern. I am poor. I am stupid. I am fat. I am smart. I am strong. These are identity level sentences. And when you say them, it's not like you've ever said it the first time. These are generally things that you will repeat over and over and over and over again. I'm such a failure. I never get anything right. I always blow up my life when things are going really well. When you tell your mind that, it's going to want to confirm that bias you have against yourself. And I know it seems absurd that our mind would try to prove something negative about ourselves to ourselves, but the mind doesn't want to be wrong. The ego feeds off of being right. So if you tell yourself, it's only a matter of time before I blow this up because that's what I am, just a big old fuck up, well, then yeah, it's only going to be a matter of time before you have an emotionally surged moment, before you say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, act in an inappropriate way, and find this amazing opportunity that has been blessed upon you begins to just evaporate right there in your very eyes, in your very hands, simply because of a behavior that you've told yourself you're sick and tired of doing, but yet you've also been telling your mind it's inevitable that you're going to do. I'm sick and tired of being emotionally surged and making irrational emotional decisions, but I'm an irrational emotional person who makes stupid decisions. You see where that seesaw is going to have a hard time balancing you out and giving you that congruency? Because when we're connecting our behaviors and our thinking patterns, it's really important that I encourage you to step inside your own self and understand that you're going to feel ashamed and guilty about things that you've done in the past. But holding on to those and whipping yourself over and over and over again about those decisions you made in the past is going to lead you to negative thoughts and feelings about yourself. And these perceptions that you have of being unworthy, of being uncomfortable with success, of fearing judgment, they will just further exacerbate that shame, that self-sabotage. And then when you begin to repeat these identity level statements to yourself, these thoughts, these feelings, these behaviors that you're sick and tired of operating your life through, and again, many of them are anchored in childhood memories, societal expectations, cultural grooming. Look, you could have something happened to you yesterday that could radically change the way you behave for the rest of your life. These moments that you anchor in, a fork in the road, a stop point, a start point, can happen anytime. But without this radical inventory of yourself, you're often left very confused, bewildered, even frustrated with yourself when you behave a certain way, even though everything about what you say and feel towards yourself wants to be behaving and acting and feeling a different way. And these cultural responses that we're programmed with aren't necessarily the fault of the parent, the guardian, the grandparent, the cultural in general. It's not like they're like, I hope that we raise all of our cultural citizens to be alcoholics. Like, no one is sitting there saying, I want you to one day be such a drunk that you lie, cheat, steal, beat up on people that you love. That's what our goal is for you. That's not the intention when these people are passing down these cultural traits and these norms that have been going for generation and generation. It's part of their programming. It's part of their normality. They may not have gone through rehab. They may not have decided to step into this world of sobriety and recovery the way that you have. So they might still be operating on, well, this is just the way that it's been for generations. It seems like a whole lot of effort to try to break the cycle now. But you're here listening to this show willing to reflect on the origins of your perceptions, on how the connecting of the behaviors and the thinking patterns is leading you to just keep looping like Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, the same fucking decisions over and over and over again, doing the same old damn thing, getting the same old damn outcome. At no point in time should anyone try to convince you that it is normal behavior to need alcohol or drugs every single day to be able to get through your day. If that's the world you live in, or even something as small as 1 or 2 beers or 1 or 2 puffs off the pipe is somehow making life that much better, I would really want you to start to investigate within yourself when you decided that. In the old trope, well, it's tasty or it's relaxing or it's a way to fit in. Yeah, you can mental gymnastics the shit out of yourself if that's what's going to help you get through the night and sleep better. But that's all you're doing is you're just trying to rationalize a behavior that even if it's that minuscule, right? Oh, but it's only 1 or 2 drinks. Come on, it's not all the time. Or maybe it is all the time, but it's not like I couldn't stop tomorrow. It's not like it's that important. It's just so tasty. Everybody's doing it. Why can't I do it? I don't know. Right? Are you happy with your life? Are you happy with your finances? Are you happy with your relationships? Are you happy with the way that you treat people? Are you happy with your body when you look in the mirror? Is everything good to go? Are you great space coastering it? Like, woohoo! Yeah, man, rock on. Because there's inevitably going to be a lot of areas in your life that if you really were willing to reflect upon, you'd realize you could be doing better. You want to be doing better. It's not a judgment on me what you're doing with your life. You're the one who's got to wake up and look at yourself in the mirror. All right? As long as where your world ends at your nose or as far as your arms can reach, you are only manipulating and effing up your life. To teach his own. You do you. But I'm over here living in my little world where my existence extends as far as my arms reach. And I will do my best not to F up my life to the point where it adversely affects your life. We all get to live in our own little bubbles where the decisions we make are the decisions that are ours. But at some point, our decisions really start to affect and manipulate and influence other people's lives, especially if we're in a long-term partnership or we're parents or we're basically human, because at some level, at some stage of a relationship, other people start relying upon you. And if you keep making these decisions about how you're going to interact with the world around you through a lens that drinking and drugging is the only way that you can cope, it's only a matter of time before the adverse effects of what you're doing to yourself begin to massively affect everybody else around you. Even if it's just something as simple as not showing up to a lunch appointment or not going over to somebody's house to help them move a couch, you are affecting. And where you start to begin to realize that a lot of these behaviors that are affecting you, which thus affect other people, aren't just coming from just your immediate family, just the parents who raised you, just your siblings. It's coming from an exhaustive response to your environment. So when you go to do these radical inventories, how is blank affecting my blank? It's really a lot of behavioral analysis, understanding of the origins, right? Again, these childhood memories, these societal expectations, the way your culture groomed you, right? Back in the day, the culture groomed women to stay at home and take care of the kids while the dad went out, brought home all the bacon, didn't show any kinds of emotions. Heaven forbid that anybody see him in a state of flex or sadness or depression. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get on with your life. Stop being a Nancy boy. What are you, gay for crying? I mean, this is some of the shit my dad said to me whenever I was a kid. This wasn't like he was trying to be a dick. This is how his culture, his environment raised him. Crying is a sign of weakness. Don't frickin' do it, right? Hard work is a sign that you're a man, and by working hard and being a man, you can bring home the bacon, which means your family's fed, there's a roof over their heads, the lights stay on, and people have what they need. And don't rely upon anybody else to pull your head out of your ass for you. It's up to you to do it. Now, our society has lost a lot of that kind of, let's just say we don't talk to each other like that. But we certainly still want to realize that we are in charge of our own lives. That constantly thinking that somebody else is going to come pull our head out of our ass for us is really taking away the control we have over our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and asking somebody else to dictate how we're going to be operating our lives. But when we bring in personal responsibility, we're not blaming, complaining, or making excuses for what happened to us. We're standing in the here and now and saying, okay, my culture raised me like this. My parents raised me like that. My first girlfriend did this, and that's why I treated women like this for the next 20 years. Okay, all that stuff happened. I'm standing on the side of the road with a flat tire. I can either scream at myself for not checking the spare for air, or I can figure out a way to get some air into my currently flat tire so that I can move on with the rest of my journey, because screaming at the flat tire isn't solving nothing. Flat tire is going to be like, yep, still flat, but thanks for, yelling and screaming. Now you're probably more dehydrated, and by the way, you're standing in the elements. So we want to be reflecting on the origins of our perceptions. I want you to consider specific situations or memories that have influenced your perceptions of yourself, of your life. Are they coming from your culture? Yes, that's because culture is everything, right? It could even be coming from your anti-culture, which is people outside of your culture who live in their own culture who still are affecting you. I don't know if I like anti-culture, because that almost presumes that, right? It's like it's the opposite, or it's bad. But other people from other cultures are still going to affect you. If you're raised in a very diverse city, you might be taking in your culture and how it's raising you, but then there's other people who are in their own subsets of culture, but because they live in your city, because they interact with you on a regular basis, they're still part of your culture. If you've got black, brown, Asian, and everybody living in one very diverse neighborhood, let's say in Los Angeles, that's part of your cultural upbringing, is that diversity. So now you're taking in multiple cultures who also have traditions and cultural norms from where they originated from, and they're bringing those, and now those are also influencing and affecting you. So I want, again, for these reflections questions to be deep, to be vulnerable, to pursue within yourself situations and memories that are still to this day affecting how you perceive yourself. Questions like, what childhood experiences shaped your views on your self-worth? What childhood experiences shaped your blank on blank? That's it. It could be your view. It could be your interpretation. It could just be the way that you treat people based on self-worth, self-confidence, based on gender, based on race, based on socioeconomic status. What childhood experiences shaped your views on people who seemingly have less money than you, or more money than you, or are black, or white, or brown, or gay, transgender? Any of these and all of these are creating your perceptions. And then potentially, let's just throw it out into a bigger scope here. You walk into a meeting like I did once at a refuge recovery center, and there's like 11 different nationalities. There's so many different cultural perceptions that are going on in that room. And I hear the way other people want to talk about their sobriety and their recovery. And then I want to judge that through the perception of a tall, straight, white American male. Well, that person is short, and they're half black and half Indian. Indian the country, not Indian the Native American. Let's just be clear. I am trying to be culturally appropriate here. And they're also a little bit less socioeconomically advantaged than me. And they were also raised in a house with abusive parents, and they were also raised in Nebraska. Like, all these different things are going to come into play on how they perceive the world. So when we don't respect somebody else's model of the world, when we try to make everybody shoehorn into our perspective, into our viewpoint, we miss out on just the infinite beauty of the human experience. So ask yourself these questions. How has media portrayals of addiction impacted your self-image? How has media portrayals of, tall, straight, white American male? Come up with your own. Maybe you're short, and maybe you're gay, and maybe you're black, and maybe you're European, or, let's say Belgian, and then you're female, like whatever. Like, come up with your own acronym. I came up with mine because it was just a lot easier to try to explain myself on this show whenever I just utilized that. And the origins of the whole reason I did that was from a Pearl Jam song called WMA, White Male American, where he sings a song about how I won the lottery when I was born, because white male American for quite a long time was considered like the best. Like, wow, you get to be white, you get to be male, and you get to be American? Way to go. You did hit the lottery when it comes to those 3 different labels. There's not necessarily that perception around white, male, or Americans anymore. But from that, I was like, well, there's other things that are also taken into account. So that's why I put in tall and straight. Because white, male, American, I kept that T-SWAM, right? Tall, straight, white, American, male. But I was like, yeah, tall. There's a perception around tall people, and there's also a perception around me being straight. So how have media portrayals of addiction impacted my self-image around myself? How has social media affected how I perceive myself in my addiction, or how I perceive my culture, how I perceive my race, my gender, my sexuality, my religion orientation? And then I want you to be able to take these insights and perhaps you go into a therapeutic session with them. You talk to your counselor about the ways that your culture has shifted the way that you perceive yourself. It's extremely important, whether you're going through cognitive behavioral therapy or narrative therapy or, brief systems therapy, or, if you're coaching with me, certainly I'm going to be bringing in some aspects of those and a heavy emphasis on neuro-linguistic programming. But when you discover these things about yourself, you start to identify the anchors you have about who you are and what you're able to achieve. And a lot of it could be positive, right? If you were born, Black and in the South, you may have been told multiple times over that you are going to be very athletic and that you're going to be bright and you're going to be able to achieve a lot of things when it comes to that world if you just work hard. Versus if you were in the Northeast and born into let's say a nerdy white family, you might have been told, well, hey, everybody else in the family has a PhD. Congratulations, you're inevitably going to get one too. But it doesn't mean that the Southern Black person is still not able to become a PhD any more than if the nerdy white kid in the Northeast decided that they were going to hit the gym and practice a lot, that they would be unathletic. Why could they not also achieve athleticism in their life? But yet we're told certain things, and I notice it happening around me whenever I hear parents talking about their kids. Oh, he's already running and jumping around. He's going to be so athletic, but he's so bright. He learned his ABCs whenever he was 3 years old. He was already doing multiplication tables at 4. He's just going to be such a little genius. Well, we create a fixed mindset in our children when we start labeling them as such, as athletic or smart or bright, rather than hardworking and tenacious and diligent and resilient. Those are growth mindset words. And if we start to label our children, is it any wonder whenever they get older, if they were labeled as athletic or smart, that they want to stay in their wheelhouse and only do things that they're already good at because they don't want to lose the label of being athletic or smart. So they're just going to keep doing what they already know they're good at, because then they can keep getting lauded and applauded for the things that they're good at, rather than stepping into perhaps a sport or an educational academia path that they're not as comfortable with. But yet if they really believed that they were hardworking and resilient, that they would figure it out. See, I was raised to believe that I'm hardworking, that I'm tenacious, that I've got a lot of potential. So I put an anchor in that potential at a very young age and said, okay, well, in order to achieve my potential, I have to be willing to work hard, if not outwork everyone around me. And I have to be tenacious and emotionally resilient, because I was raised in a house with my mom dying of Crohn's disease and a stepdad who was always working, because again, he believed that you bring home the bacon and that's how you prove you're a man. Not that you support anybody emotionally, but you support everybody financially. He showed his love with receipts. And my mom was very often sick, and she didn't necessarily have the capabilities of raising me with the emotional intelligence I would have preferred. So I began to model my emotional intelligence off of her, which was erratic at times, aloof and standoffish, and then other times it was a lot, and it was heavy, and it was overwhelming. And so I can tend to show a lot of those signs myself. But it's within this inventory that I've located this information so that I can monitor whether it's benefiting me or not now. They were part of my culture just as much as being, a Caucasian American. Any of these things have affected me. I've also been affected by my parents. And of course, when you start to bring in the media and the social media, there's a perception of white versus black, right? Back in the day, you couldn't find a doll that was not white. Barbie, blonde hair, blue-eyed, big bosoms, and little perky butt. That's not generally much more than 1% of 1% of 1% of the population. And nowadays, it may not even be that much with the way that people can go off and get plastic surgery, how much we even really know people were walking around with what God gave them. The point being is that how we are perceived by society is merely just a small percentage of who we actually are. Martin Luther King said it best, and I know I've quoted this before, but judge me by the content of my character, not the color of my skin or my gender or my orientation. Issue is that it's not just externally that we're being judged, it's internally too. And that's the shame, and that's the guilt, and that's how we perpetrate upon ourselves these indignities, these pains that would be fine's not the best word, but it would be understandable from the outside world where everyone's looking to delete, distort, and generalize. But when we're stigmatizing our own selves and our own minds, we are not benefiting our sobriety and recovery. And it's a consistent practice. Like, you have to set realistic goals. Catch yourself when you're saying negative things about being tall, straight, white American male, whatever your acronym is, right? I'll just keep using mine as an example because I'm running out of time here. And honestly, how many more hypotheticals can I come up with until I know for a fact that this is connected with you? I'm pretty sure I nailed that in the first 10 minutes. Point that I can make above all the points is that your cultural identity is dramatically affecting your perception about yourself. And if you don't do some level of inventory to see how your perceptions, how external perceptions from others, from society, from media are potentially affecting how you begin to interact with yourself inside your own head, then you're once again being the first person to reject yourself. Well, I can't get sober because I'm Irish. I can't have a great relationship because I'm transgender. I can't find a friend circle, a social circle, a support system in the South because I'm from Big Sky country. Whatever reason you want to say, all you're doing is just putting yourself into this little corner and building a wall around yourself. Because I can assure you that somewhere out there, there is a place, there is a person who has no desire to judge you based off of anything at all, let alone how they see your labels externally. It's just, you're going to find that place. And I hope that place is at a support meeting. I hope that place is in a therapeutic session and that person can guide you to feeling healthier. I hope that that place, honestly, is inside your own head. And when you set down these goals, and again, we're looking for small, but yet specific goals of next time you say, I'm not worthy. Where did that come from? Was that your parent telling you that you were a worthless piece of crud whenever you were a kid? Is that somewhere in your culture, right? Maybe you're, from a country that's had civil war for like 2 decades, like Syria, and now you're in America. You feel like you left people behind. You've started drinking an obscene amount. And now you find yourself in these support meetings, and you're like, oh, great, just another reason why anyone from my country sucks. But you don't. It's not your country. You don't blame the country. You don't have to blame your culture. You don't have to necessarily sit there and blame yourself for everything. Because again, personal responsibility. We're not looking to blame. We're not looking to make excuses. We're not looking to complain. We're looking to stand right here in the here and now and make a different choice based off of how we would like to start behaving moving forward. Go and listen to other people's stories. What were some of the challenges they overcame? Go ask people who are leading voices in the addiction recovery community. There might be a presentation or a workshop at a local inpatient, outpatient addiction recovery center where they allow people from the community who are also going through their sobriety and recovery journey to come in and potentially see someone like me. Your perceptions are going to shape how you think, how you behave, how you view the world. And they're all going to be impacting your sobriety and recovery journey. What I've wanted to do, and I hope in some way, ebb and flow, I suppose, in this episode was challenge these harmful perceptions that are related to your self-worth, your health, your capabilities, your skills. I mean, look at, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs or the Dilt's pyramid, and look how your skills and your capabilities and your environment and your support system all start to compound and affect how you identify yourself. These harmful perceptions that you have, they didn't just come from your own life experiences and you deciding that you are a worthless piece of crap. It came from so many different places that to ever say that we'll find them all it's quite a challenge. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but there's a lot of layers. I'm pretty sure I used the word infinite earlier. It's through self-reflection exercises. It's through self-identifying what behaviors are no longer benefiting your long-term desires for sobriety, for recovery, for success, for growth of confidence. It's through identifying these perceptions and understanding their origins that we can begin to connect them to our behaviors, not to blame something else, but to just give us more understanding of where it came from. As you discover strategies to counteract these negative thoughts, I want you to engage in positive activities. Build your support systems. Build your relationships. Positive activities could be, when was the last time you told yourself you were unhealthy and you'd never be able to do anything physically exerting? Go find a really easy walk. Go find a moderate hike. Go find something and take water and shade if you need. But go and do something that contradicts a negative label you've been placing on yourself. Personal insights, specific things that you can point at and say that, my views on somebody who's no longer a part of my gender orientation or my sexual orientation or my race or my culture or my environmental location I am in the United States or wherever you're at in the world, right? Maybe somebody from Cambridge is looked down upon because they're from Manchester or from Leeds. I'm just using England places because I watched a YouTube video on their economic status. I watch a lot of random YouTube shit. My point being is that you're from a country. You're from a place where there's a lot of different subsets other than just, oh, we're English, or oh, we're French, or oh, we're Serbian, or oh, we're from Morocco. There's all these other subsets that come from that. I want you to begin to notice how these labels are affecting how you perceive yourself, what you think you're capable of, the skills you think you can learn, and what you can achieve. I want you to reshape your perceptions. This is where we start to build lasting recovery. This is where personal growth, it gets into the depths, and it really, you plant this seed, and I'm telling you, the root system grows and grows and grows. We want to make massive changes in our lives. We want to lay down a foundation that is stable and strong and resilient. You can do that within yourself, but it's going to take some self-discovery. It's going to take a determination to not just look past something because that's the way it's always been, or it's more comfortable in the shadows. Because things in the shadows, they're waiting to jump up and startle you. And if you've got that fear of opening up that one closet, of opening up that one door, of touching upon that one topic, that's going to just slowly but surely erode some aspect of your confidence, of your worth, of your esteem. And we don't want to be doing that. Not when we're in self-reflection and personal growth mode. I want you to embrace the power that comes from challenging your perceptions, unlocking your potential, thriving in a society that may not necessarily want to do you harm every day, but is certainly not necessarily always looking out for your best case scenarios. It's not always looking out for your best life ever. The world is going to be what the world is externally. Make sure that your internal world is one that is fulfilling you, that's propagating your desires to be successful, to love yourself. Because when you can achieve those things internally, the people that are the closest to you will blossom, because they too will realize that they aren't stuck in who they've been, that the world is infinite, that life is infinite. And whether it's through sobriety, addiction recovery, or just dropping a vice that's just no longer benefiting them, growth comes from determining that it would be better to be reaching toward the upwards than afraid of what's behind us and downwards. As always, my friends, if there's more about this that touches upon you, that you care about, jessemogul.com/askme, fill out the live coaching form. Fill out the NLP coaching form. The things that I talk about on this show, I literally teach, and I'm getting ready to launch a 4-week boot camp all about NLP and recovery, and how you can just take some of the foundational blocks of what it is I talk about on this show, and you can immediately turn those things into being that enlightenment, that empowerment, that desire to better yourself. You can lock these in as attributes you can always call upon. And if you want to go out there and be of benefit and service to the community that's been of benefit and service to you so much, and you're like, how do I become an addiction recovery coach? How do I go out and become an even more powerful recovery support specialist? How do I make even a modicum, even the smallest indentation into this world where so many people have benefited me? I teach an entire class on that. And it's fantastic whenever I see people step in to their meant to be, to their calling. We all were at one time or another on fire, and somebody came rushing up and putting us out with buckets of water. And then when we got ourselves healthy, we picked up buckets of water and we ran into that fire to help somebody else out. If you want to become even more empowered, be able to help even more people and guide them to a life that truly is full of accomplishment and the quenching of their desires, I've got a lot of different ways to help you with that. And jessemogul.com/askme is the first step in letting me know that you want to know more. Hope to hear from you soon. As always, inclusivity over exclusivity, the power of positive energy, release and flow. Every day is the best day of our lives when we wake up sober. Shout out to Sunshine. Shout out to Robert. Glow on. I will see you next week. Bye-bye.